Hi, I'm Tom Burgess, and thank you for listening to the Weekly Wake Up, where we set off the alarm on what is really happening in our country. Now, today we're going to be talking about reform of social care and the case for a national care service. And can education take you out of poverty, or is it a myth? And yes, there's another report on homelessness. Thousands who are suffering from the constant insecurity of a temporary accommodation. But we don't just want to talk about these issues, we want to present some practical answers. And that needs political will to see action happen. So let me first introduce the team. Welcome back, Satya. How are you doing? Will you put your microphone down and stop knocking it all over? I can hear you.
Hi, Tom. I'm good. I'm glad to be back.
Oh, good. Well, we're very pleased to have you back. Well, so what's the topic you're going to talk to us today about?
Well, I'm going to talk about the social care crisis, which, is really plaguing us in the UK. And some people are saying it's an epidemic of social care here in the UK.
And Leah, you're good to have you back. We missed you last week. I certainly had train issues.
I did
right?
have train issues. Yeah. Apologies.
What was it? Leaves on the line or just running late?
Well, you know what it's like.
So what's the topic that's top of your list this week?
So I'm this week going to be talking about some research that Teach First, the education charity, released around how students from poorer areas are more likely to get lower GCSE results.
Okay, well, we'll be talking about that in a moment, and then I'll also, after we've had those two, we'll talk a bit about the issue of temporary accommodation. The other members of the team, Oliver is on holiday and Hugh is preparing to move house. So hopefully they'll be back with us next week. And last week, in fact, it was just, we were a bit short. It was only me and the two studio cats, Gary and Brian. But today they've been banished from the studio because Satya is more of a dog person.
I love them really.
I know.
I love them really.
They're very friendly towards you.
They seem to like me a lot.
Yeah. But it's
because you bring the biscuits, Satya.
Best that they're not here because they keep walking across the buttons and setting off.
Leah, you brought the biscuits today.
I did bring the biscuits
Thank you
today.
so much for
Thank
that.
you.
The biscuits very well. We can't eat them chewing because it's too crunchy. These particular ones are very crunchy, but they're very nice.
Very nice.
A sponge cake next time. That was an endorsement for Hobnobs.
Oh no.
Okay, sponge cake. Well, that'll get a bit sticky on our fingers. Anyway, maybe we'll have a biscuit later. Well, we've already had a couple of them. There's a few left. Anyway, we're not here to talk about biscuits. We're here actually to talk about the real issues today. And before we get started into our chat, I just wanted to tell you about something that's coming up very soon. It's the Big Tent Ideas Festival at Mudshoot Park and Farm in Tower Hamlets, London. And it's on the 31st of August. That's a Saturday between 9 and 8. And the Big Tent Ideas Festival brings together people from all backgrounds and political affiliations. It's not, as some newspapers have described it last time, as a Tory Glastonbury. Well, I'm going along anyways, but I don't think there's any bands on. And you might come along, Satya, really?
If I can make it, I will be there.
It's going to be a day for political and cultural debate, apparently. And there's also a couple of episodes about the event on a podcast called Commons People from the Huffington Post. We'll hope to see some of you down there. Hope to be doing a programme after the event on some of the people that we've met there. And I just wanted to mention another podcast that I found worth a listen, and that's called Connected and Disaffected. And I had a chat with one of the co-hosts, Rowan Emsley, who's actually based in Brussels. And this is about politics and the future of technology. Now, Rowan and his two co-hosts talk about big new ideas and what they think is going to change politics. And they're often about technology. And we're always looking for new people on the Real Agenda team. So whether you'd like to help with content production or marketing, do contact us now, and it would be great if you want to get involved. Email us at info@realagendaradio.org. Before we start the chat, each weekly Wake Up consists of 2 to 4 panellists. Well, we've got 3 of us here today, and each chooses a topic, which we just talked about, related to a recent event or media story connected to the fundamental issues of reducing inequality, resolving poverty, and bringing greater social and economic justice, as that's the real agenda. We discuss this with a view to what can be done and to resolve these issues and what we, the people, can do. So let's get on with the chat. Satya, kick us off with your topic for today.
Yeah, I mean, this is really heart-rending because I don't know if anybody saw the Panorama programme, which was about, the social care crisis, which was entitled Who Cares?
Actually, I didn't see it, but I'm going to look it up.
Yeah, it really struck me how sad and awful it is, the situation that we've got at the moment in the UK with this social care crisis. It's been over 2 decades that, we've been grappling with this. nobody has yet been able to solve it. So we've had a staggering 12 reviews on this and about 13 different ministers. So the issue is that actually as more and more people get older, they need more care. They need looking after. They can't do things for themselves. But it's not just the elderly. It's also younger people who might be having different kinds of diseases. So in the Panorama programme, there was a young woman of 37 years old who had chronic arthritis and she couldn't move. Her husband had to give up his job, become self-employed in order to look after her. And there just wasn't enough care so that he could get on with his life and look after their 3 children, and she could get some care, and it just wasn't available. In the UK, we spend £15 billion annually on social care. Over half of it's for younger adults, but the rest of it is for older people. But it's just not enough.
I actually have an example that happened to one of my friends. My friend's father has dementia. Obviously, with that requires full-time care. Originally, they got a nurse in to support him, but they had to get a private nurse because under the NHS, dementia is classed as mental health disorder, so it doesn't receive the same support if, say, you required support for if you had cancer and you required a nurse at home. So I think originally it was £2,000 a month for the care of a nurse. So they eventually had to move their house, sell their house to support the care, to pay for it.
You've picked up on a very key issue about this, is that the two areas are quite separate. So the NHS gives care at the point of need and people don't have to pay for that. But when it's social care, actually that's not classed in the same way. And so people have to pay for their own social care. And that's where the issue is. That's where the problems come.
I find that just shocking that they don't class mental health disorders in the same way as they class other health disorders.
And I think that's one of the things that we're looking at as a solution. So interestingly, Boris Johnson in his inaugural speech said that he really wants to work on this issue. To quote him, he said that he is committed to give every older person the dignity and security that they deserve. And he's going to do that by solving the care crisis once and for all. How the hell is he going to do it? You know, there is this idea, the Institute of Public Policy Research have put down a proposal saying that actually we should have a national care service in the same way that we have a national health service. The care that's needed should be provided for free at the point of need for all of those people. Obviously, if people are in residential care, people would have to still pay for their residential care. But actually, if they need nursing, if they need, hospital care, if they need care at home, that should be provided by
the National Care Service.
The National Care Service can find the money because, for example, I know a family whose grandmother needed a lot of care and they actually couldn't find the care. And so the husband had to give up his job. He went part-time. Therefore, they were then getting benefits to top up their wages because he didn't have enough money for their basic needs at home while he was caring for his mother. So it actually doesn't solve the problem.
Still being paid for in a different way, whereas we could actually have a service that would help these people, exactly as you said, and then they can be going out to work and earning money and doing good things.
And the stress it caused the family was enormous stress. So actually, we can solve a lot of other issues if we were actually to provide the right kind of care for people when they need it. And it is really about our values. Again, I always talk about the values that we have in this country, and the values is that we look after the most vulnerable. At the moment, we're not doing that, particularly around social care. We're not doing that.
It certainly seems to be the case. So that's another priority and a topic that we want to pursue again in the future. So let's move on to Leah. So your topic for today.
Yeah, so Teach First, the education teachers charity, released some research this week which showed that students from poorer areas are more likely to achieve low GCSE grades. So this research has obviously come out in the week where children throughout England, Wales and Northern Ireland will actually get their GCSE results. So some of the figures from the research, 38% of the poorest pupils will fail to pass the English. This is compared to 22% from children from more affluent areas. Nearly half, so 46% of the poorest pupils will not pass history. This is in comparison to 27% of people from more affluent areas. and 50% will not pass geography in comparison to 27% of the richest pupils. So we're really seeing this across all the subjects. So this inequality obviously will then impact people's chances of getting into university, getting into apprenticeships, getting into well-paid jobs. I think we have this idea that education is really your route out of poverty to move up, to be socially mobile and to, get a good job. But these figures show that's actually not the case.
Well, it's the odds are stacked against people.
Yeah.
So we're making it more difficult. There's no substitute for working hard, but if you're in an environment or insecure domestic situation, temporary accommodation or poor accommodation or single parent, there's a lot of pressure in family life, and therefore it becomes very difficult to do your homework and study hard, doesn't it?
Yeah. So these are children that have been identified in poor areas. So this is really like your postcode really is defining your GCSEs here. So if you live in a poor area, you're more likely to get these lower results, which then means you're probably going to have a hard time to get into university, to get an apprenticeship. So it feels like your postcode will define your future lifestyle and the opportunities that you will get from the get-go.
Yeah.
So indeed, so really in terms of sort of answers to that, resolving poverty or giving people decent wages and getting the cost of housing down so that they can actually have a better home life.
It's really interesting that I also read a report which was aligned to that, Leah, and it said that children from the poorest background actually go to schools that are actually rated bad, and so not only do they get poor results, but they go to schools that are actually rated poor.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a vicious circle.
Yeah, it's exactly
that. How are they going to get out of that?
Then you don't have good GCSEs to get into university and then go on to other things like we say apprenticeships and such. So it does seem like you're set up to fail from the get-go. Charity Teach First, their recommendation was obviously for the government to spend more money on these poor communities. But then when you obviously look at our government, you have Boris Johnson, which is I think he's the 20th Prime Minister that comes from Eton. How relatable is this going to be to him? How much is this going to resonate with him?
We feel that a lot of the political elite are detached from the real issues. Structural problem is that wages are too low, the minimum wage is too low, housing is too high, and this is why we're getting people who can't afford to keep up their rents, or they're being asked to pay the council tax, which never used to be the case. So the pressure, domestic financial pressure, is so great, and if we can actually solve that with higher wages and lower costs, we're going to make some more progress in the long run, and then these will not be such poor areas, right?
I think also for the way that we judge people for things like employment and university, we're judging them on things like GCSEs. So if we aren't setting people up to obtain good results in that, then how can we judge them on it?
Yeah, absolutely. It seems to me like the system is set up in that way that from whichever way you turn, it seems to be that there is injustice. It just seems, how do you get out of it? Because as Tom said, if the parents are struggling every single day to just keep their heads above water, teachers are talking about doing homework, or they're talking about going on holiday. When you talked about how children aren't getting good grades in certain subjects, well, actually, it might be that if children from more affluent backgrounds are having a different kind of family life, where maybe they're going to museums, maybe they're going on cultural holidays.
Yeah, it might help with
it might
French.
Help you to
if you're going to the Alps skiing every year.
Exactly. Something has got to be done, and I'm not sure at the moment what that is. What do you think it is, Tom?
I can tell you precisely. Well, not actually precisely, but I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's just the fundamental problems of why have we got so many poor areas, and why is it getting it worse? Because there's proactive policies to save money that are making things worse. So if we cut in benefits, it's making life worse for people. If we're not paying them enough wages, it's making life difficult.
Yeah.
So
austerity isn't working. We know that. We all know that austerity isn't working.
I think that's a good summary for the subject.
I think more people, most people with more than half a brain are aware of that.
And yet we continue. Was it earlier this year that Theresa May said, no more austerity? And actually, I haven't seen any action on it. I know she's gone, but I can't see anybody taking any action on it at the moment.
Well, to us, and certainly us on this programme, and hopefully our listeners, this is the number one priority, to try and resolve poverty and inequality and other issues like Brexit, although an issue that needs resolving, is actually not the core issue. This is the core issue, and there are ways of resolving it, which I was going to touch on some of that after the next piece, which is related in some ways, because we were talking about a report that came out this week from the Children's Commissioner, and they called it Bleak House, remembrance of the Charles Dickens sort of era. But the report says that there's 124,000 homeless children were recorded as living in temporary accommodation in England at the end of 2018, and that's an 80% increase since 2010. And on top of this, it calculates there's 92,000 homeless young people in families who are sofa surfing with friends or relatives. So this situation we've got here is difficult. Crazy situation that we've let happen. It's ruining people's lives. Now, this is another report on homelessness. Why can't we take action? The Children's Commission is actually a government agency, so we would expect things to happen. What do any of you think?
Well, didn't the
not any of you,
new
Satya and
Chancellor
Leah? I don't know any of you.
didn't the Chancellor announce 600 million more for housing? But he hasn't actually said where it's going to come from.
I don't have that information in front of me, as they say. But, I would like to think so.
When you were talking around that, I was thinking back to the podcast we did 2 weeks ago where Satya covered this budget that's been given by us by the European Commission and not been spent.
It's such a waste.
Well, I'll just give you a bit more information on this one, because this is a subject dear to the heart of the organisation. I'm also connected with Taxpayers Against Poverty, and the Reverend Paul Nicholson, who started that, he has been on TV this week talking about it, and there was also a letter in The Guardian, but he works very closely with the homeless in Haringey in London, particularly with those in temporary accommodation. And we've talked about this before on the programme. This is a big issue, this temporary accommodation. And the story that we just talked about, the Bleak House report, got picked up in the media this week, where they picked up the idea that people were in shipping containers. Certainly they didn't seem to be particularly good accommodation, but when they first came up with this idea, it was heralded as a great thing, because it would very easily build accommodation, put it together. Unfortunately, it does seem that some of these are, either too hot, too cold, or damp, or whatever. Most of the people that were interviewed with the media, said, well, it was better than where they were before, and at least had their own private space. But it was interesting that the media angle was picking up on the shipping container. That's not the issue. It's the fact that these people are in temporary accommodation and they get shifted around, and it upsets education. It comes back to our education point. If you're going to be shifting schools, or you don't know where you're going to be, you've got an insecure home, it's very difficult to do your homework, you've got no space, and so on. So it just doesn't move forward. Are there any solutions in sight? Well, yes, there could be some things that we could do here, and I'm just going to mention those briefly.
I was just going to say, it's quite interesting that the story was called Bleak House.
Well, the report was called Bleak House.
The report
yeah.
was called Bleak, because actually, when I read it and I looked at that story, it did seem like we were going back to Dickensian times, because it was that bad. And I'm thinking, are we really in the UK in 2019? Is this actually really happening here?
Well, yes, it is. And of course, a lot of us don't see it every day, but there are some answers, both long-term and short-term. And one of the main reasons for homelessness is people can't keep up with the rent payment because it's too high, or the council tax because it's too high. If you're on benefits, then the universal credit is too low, or takes too long, or the wages are too low. Obviously increases the people are going to be homeless, and so we have to address those situations. The other thing is we should abolish council tax for tenants and increase, which used to be the case, the local property taxes used to be only paid by landlords, and now it's paid by everybody. And we should increase the bans on high-priced property, so there's a greater contribution for those who own more of the value. And then we'd bring in land value tax, but that's another discussion. And we need to adopt minimum income standards for welfare benefit and for pay immediately, so living wage, but we need it for minimum income standards on welfare, because it's the financial answer is, it's not we can't afford it, because if we do these things, we're going to have a better society with more people involved and more people in economic activity. And the other thing, which you'll be hearing more about, certainly from Taxpayers Against Poverty, is establish quantitative easing for houses housing and set up a national community land trust which will buy land and keep it in public ownership. And, which a lot of people don't realise, 70% of the cost of a house is the price of land. So if you take that out, then the cost of new homes would be 30% of what they are now. And that would also mean rents are cheaper and more affordable. So there you go. There's
lots and lots of solutions, aren't there?
There are quite a few solutions if we only would get action on it, and they're not actually that difficult.
So where's the problem? Where's the problem, Tom?
We can't quite see it from here, but the government offices on Westminster are over there, and elected people that I don't think really understand it. I think we know where the problem is, but we're getting out of time soon. We've been talking about all that, and would you believe it? It's nearly the end of the show.
Wow, that's gone really, really quick.
It does indeed.
Time passes faster when you're having fun, Satya.
When you're enjoying yourself.
I just think that as well as all of those solutions that you've just mentioned there, Tom, I think part of the issue that I was talking about, having a social care service, we would all have to pay a bit more. And I think lots of people are prepared to pay more to have a better, fairer, more just, more caring, more compassionate society.
Well, I think they are, those that are in a position to pay more. But
That's what I'm saying. The people who are in a position to pay more.
But we should be taxing, the answer to that is to tax wealth rather than income, because income is what you earn, wealth is what you accumulate through actually doing work. Nothing wrong with accumulating a bit of wealth for security reasons, but we've got to a stage where it's just ridiculous. So the tax should be on wealth, and if we taxed wealth, we could take a lot of people out of the lower level out of income taxes and other taxes, and we'd have a more equal society, which is actually better for everybody, even for the wealthy.
It's interesting. I was reading something about that executive pay has actually gone down by 16% compared to last year. But where has the extra money gone? I reckon it's gone to the shareholders. That's what's happened.
Well, there's actually a report come out from the High Pay Centre.
Oh, there's a huge discrepancy.
Huge amount, multiple still. More than it is from the median wage.
Yeah.
So there's still this huge discrepancy, which has got a much, much higher. That's about the show for this week, and we hope that we've woken you up and that we've helped to inform, inspire, and you'll want to get involved to make change happen. You can email us at info@realagenda.org. If you want to email Satya, you can Satya@realagenda.org or Leah@realagenda.org, or just info. Is that right?
Fine.
Anyway, or you can contact us via our website, realagenda.org. So just before we go, I just wanted to say a bit about, I should ask Leah and Satya, have you got anything else to add before we wrap up?
No, I think we're done.
I think we're good.
Okay, time for the biscuits then soon, is it?
Biscuits and wine, I think, is what you promised.
Oh, well, we got the biscuits.
He's trying to get out of it now.
Anyway, so just coming up, what's up on the Real Agenda? Coming up soon is the second episode of our new series, Profit for Purpose, which we'll be talking to Paul Lindley, the founder of Ella's Kitchen, the organic baby food company. And, of course, the weekly Wake Up should be back next Friday. And we put out a call for American contributors the other day, and we've had a few people respond. So we hope to do an American edition fairly soon. And we're also doing a series of podcasts for Taxpayers Against Poverty, which I've recorded over an hour of discussions with the Reverend Paul Nicholson. It should make a very interesting 3 episodes, which will be starting in a couple of weeks. It's an early time to go time, so a special thanks to our sponsors, the Reverse Media Group, one of the fastest growing search and media companies. Find out why at reversemediagroup.com. Now, one thing is certain, people want to see change to a more compassionate and just society, as well as more courageous politicians prepared to do the right thing for people over party. It's urgent, and it's up to us to make it happen. That's the Real Agenda. I'm Tom Burgess, and it's goodbye from
Satya.
Thanks very much, Satya, for your contribution today. And also from
Leah.
Thank you very much for your contribution today.
Tom.
And thank you very much indeed for listening. And we look forward to talking to you again soon.